Hi everyone, welcome to Sandy Hewen Yoga. I'm so excited to have this video for you today. I'm going to teach you how to teach downward facing dog. First of all, we're going to see how the body looks within downward facing dog, what anatomical things are happening within the shoulders, the hips, and the spine, and the legs. And then I'm going to teach you step by step how to get people into this posture safely, easily, with a full clear comprehension of the pose. Stay tuned to the end. The last bit of this video will be all about common teaching cues and what to say and what not to say and the reasons why. So yes, all the way to the end. Okay, let's get started just looking at downward facing dog. So I know a lot of us have seen the posture. We've done the posture. We're not sort of avoiding it or devoid of information about it. So the general posture for downward facing dog looks like this. And for me, I can put my heels down, but a lot of people won't be able to. The knees will be slightly bent and the heels will be lifted. So let's talk a little bit about the anatomy here, and I'm going to start with the shoulders first. So in downward facing dog, our shoulders here are fully flexed because this is flexion of the shoulder. They're upwardly rotated through the scapula, and there is external rotation in the shoulders here. For a lot of people with shoulder issues, or if there's just a lot of general tightness in the shoulders, this kind of position is very, very tough. So I'm going to try to face you here and show you my shoulders in downward facing dog, upwardly rotated, externally rotated, and fully flexed. Now, if the trapezius is really tight, you might see this, where the shoulders are way up to the ears. If there's a lot of internal rotation, you might see the hands turning in and the eyes of the elbows turning more closer towards the knees than towards the front of the mat there. And that might be certain compensations within your downward facing dog. You'll also see compensations in your downward facing dog rippling down the spine. So if the shoulders can't do that upward rotation, they can't do that external rotation, and they can't do that full flexion, you'll see that lack of flexion, lack of external rotation, lack of upward rotation, and maybe a little bit of that rounding in your spine, and the ears are maybe even forward of the upper arm bones. So that ripples all the way down, like I said, towards the low back. Because we are cueing people to keep their hips way up high, a lot of people say that inverted V shape in downward facing dog. There is a lot of that, like, oh yeah, I really want to get my butt up. I really want to get my butt up, but I don't know how. My legs have to be straight, and there's so much going on here, and it's so much work that the low back might start to curve into flexion. So rather than being more neutral, you see a lot of that cat back in downward facing dog, and that's very easily corrected with just by bending into those knees. So yeah, those are some common compensations. Sometimes it'll come from the ankles and the feet in your downward facing dog. If you just look at the feet, the legs are in this dorsiflexion. The ankles are in this dorsiflexion. So if there's a lot of tension in the calf muscles or in the Achilles, that won't happen. It just won't. Your heels will have to be a little bit more lifted, and this will just be like an unconscious, subconscious thing that happens because the ankles can't dorsiflex to that degree. Okay. So that's what it looks like. That's what we see in our yoga classes as challenges we come up against when we are looking to teach a nice, good downward facing dog. So to be compassionate for everyone's different anatomy and everything that we bring into the practice, we know that we're not going to be able to get rid of all the shoulder tension in 1 hour. That's really, really tough. We're not going to get rid of all that ankle tension in 1 hour. Again, that's really, really tough. If you have a way of doing it, please let me know, because I don't know any way of doing it within 1 hour of a general yoga class. So this is one way that we can do to cue and to speak about down dog that's a little bit more compassionate, that will get us into a semblance of the pose that does the purpose of the pose without aggravating any tension injuries or tension tendencies within the shoulder, the neck, or the spine, or the hips, or the legs. So I always start down dog teaching in tabletop. So hands and knees position, wrists underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips. From here, we measure proper shoulder width distance, which is not the distance of the inside armpits, but is more the middle of the humerus. So if you think like you can, almost like you have Spider-Man laser vision that you can see through the flesh and see to the middle of the shoulder, you're looking for this middle of the humerus bone. This is your upper arm bone here. For some people, they prefer down dog hands that are even as wide as opposed to the outside delts, so the flesh of the shoulder, so way out here. So your distance is going to really depend on your comfort in upward rotation and external rotation of the shoulders. So I say either shoulder width or a little bit wider to the width of your delts. And that's going to be very different for everyone. So let's go with the shoulder width distance here. Hands are not super widely spread, but spread enough that you can feel the second knuckle ground down into the mat. And then don't worry too much about where the eye of the elbow faces. I recently had one student who actually said she hurt her shoulder trying to wrap her triceps in and spin the eye of the elbow forward. And for me, I have these really flexible shoulders, super flexible elbows as well, and you can sort of see that it's very easy for me to spin it forward and then overdo it and because I want to be so good, I want to be a good yoga student, but I can overdo it and actually wrench into my shoulder and injure my rotator cuff. So I just want to have the action of spinning and do it enough that I can feel my armpit muscles turn on. So that's all I'm going to do. Maybe I'll teach a little bit of this play that everyone can do this mostly, as long as there's no rotator cuff injuries. Everyone naturally has this ability to spin the eye of the elbow in and out. And then go to neutral where the eye of the elbow is mostly facing one another. And then puff your chest. And then very gently turn the eye of the elbow just a little bit forward, enough that you can feel your armpit muscles turn on. Those are your external rotators of your shoulder. We want to keep those on. Then from there, I teach a baby down dog, leaning the hips back and starting the process of shoulder flexion. For rotator cuff injuries, for pec injuries, lat injuries, this already, just leaning the hips back is going to be a lot of work. You may hold your students here for a while, push into the arms, little bit of external rotation. Don't overdo external rotation. And then that leaning into flexion. So we're going step by step into these anatomical positions of the shoulder. Once you're there, and if that's not causing any pain, you're not overdoing in your elbows, you're not overdoing the external rotation, then you can begin the lifting of the knees up off the ground. From here, I say, don't worry about your legs. Bend your knees, let your hips hang there wherever they are, and then focus on this pushing of your arms, maintaining a little bit of that external rotation. The armpit muscles are on, and this pushing so the chest is reaching back, and the arms are sort of aligning to by your ears. Try not to go above your ears, because that'll take you into that retraction of the scapula, and we don't really want that. We just want the shoulders to be upwardly rotated in this nice, strong held position. Whew. And that's tough. That's a lot of work. For people who do have rotator cuff, just like non-awareness of the rotator cuff, even just doing this exercise of spinning the eye of the elbow forward and back, and then really doing it subtly is going to be a lot of work for the rotator cuff. Okay, that's wonderful. So let's move on to the spine. The movement of the spine very much depends on the movement of the pelvis and the hamstrings and the hips. So from your tabletop, you can teach a little bit of a cat-cow, and this will give you that movement of the spine. And then you teach the leaning back, the external rotator, then the leaning back, and then you teach the lifting of the knees. From here, I would like to see people start to teach a little bit of cat-cow here in down dog, just to feel how the spine moves. Remember, in your down dog, it's mostly a neutral spine, and a neutral spine isn't this, and it isn't this. It's somewhere in the middle where the curves of your spine are maintained. The lumbar curve in your low back, the kyphotic curve in your upper back, and then the neck lumbar curve, lordosis curve as well. So those curves are maintained within a neutral spine, and they're not exaggerated either way, up or down, whether it's more kyphosis, more lordosis. They're just neutral. And that's hard to find in downward facing dog. So let the knees bend. You set your shoulders. You let your knees bend. You do a few rounds of cat-cow so you can feel extremes what are happening. And then you go somewhere in the middle. And then from there, keep the spine in place. And this is the hardest part. Keep the spine just as it is and try bringing one heel down. If that immediately rounds your back, bend that knee back in and stay with neutral spine. Try the other leg. If that brings your spine into that rounded spine, you bend that knee and bring your spine back to neutral. This is your down dog until we can get the hamstrings a little bit looser, until the heels can extend down and the ankles a little bit looser, so that the ankles and the hips don't pull on the spine into either that roundedness or overly archedness, whichever one it might be, depending on your individual anatomy. So knowing that everyone has a very different anatomy brings us to our usage of cues as yoga teachers, and what we see as appropriate for a large-scale class, which is what we see mostly in the Western world. We're not often teaching just one person. And when you are speaking to a large room of people, we do have to sort of be careful of the words we say, which is why, like as I gave you with the example of rotation in the shoulders, to be really specific that I don't want the eye of the elbow to spin forward. In fact, all I want is enough of the eye of the elbow spinning towards the front until you can feel the external rotators of your shoulders. So I call those armpit muscles beginning to engage. And so is the same thing for a lot of the other cues that we see. So one of the big ones that really rifles my feathers and just really gets me going is this cue of dropping your shoulders down. We know that upward rotation of your shoulders is exactly the opposite of dropping your shoulders down. If you drop your shoulders down within your down dog, you lose the strength of upward rotation. Now, I know the reason a lot of people say drop the shoulders down is because we don't want to overuse the trapezius. However, the trapezius does need to be used whenever those arms are overhead, just a little. We don't want it so hypertonic that it's locked in place, but we want a little bit of that usage of the trapezius, because that's what the trapezius does. It does help, it assists in upward rotation and maintenance of upward rotation. So how can we tell people to not use your trapezius when it needs to be used? And softening it fully is just not a useful cue. It's not a useful way to use the shoulders. So that's one thing. Instead of saying drop your shoulders down, what I would do is backpedal my step-by-step movement into down dog. Drop the knees, flexion through the shoulders. This will also take you into upward rotation. Then seeing if you can maintain the push of the arms, that working of the eye of the elbow spinning forward just enough to turn on the external rotators, and then seeing if you can begin to upwardly rotate more and lean back a little bit more so that the ears are aligned with the upper arm bones. And then once you have that, there's that push into the arms. And from here, you can start to sneak one leg back, and this will bring you into more pressure into the hands, more work in the shoulders, and then the other leg back. But you don't have to. This is just to give you that semblance of pushing into the arms in your down dog. And if you notice that the shoulders immediately scrunch up as soon as you lift both knees, then you know that the trapezius is overworking. And then we just have to approach the trapezius from another level. Yeah, another way of releasing that muscle. And it's very postural. All right, so I think we've covered it all. Why we're not saying drop your shoulders in downward facing dog, and that nice step-by-step way of approaching down dog from hands, shoulders, spine, hips, then the legs last of all. All right. I hope this video was so helpful for you to help fine-tune your teaching and your offerings. Please do subscribe to my channel if you liked what you saw here today, and make sure you also follow for updated notifications. If you are interested in practicing with me regularly, please head over to my Patreon page. I'll link it up down below in the description of this video, and you can see we have a 7-day morning yoga challenge to get you moving and going straight away first thing in the morning. Thank you so much. Namaste. Have a great day, everyone.